So we're starting today to learn about how to manage porting in your number from other networks. At the end of this training, what you'll hopefully be able to do is you'll be able to understand why some of those ports have rejected, the status of the port as it's moving from one network to the other. You'll be able to check the dates that it was submitted at and the date that it is due to complete at as well. And you'll also, the most important thing is you'll be able to find out the reason why the port failed and what has caused the port to fail on that. The first thing we're going to do is, I'm sure you've all seen the Fmnp management console before. What we're going to be trying to do today is to show you how to get the most out of it and possibly use features that wouldn't be part of the norm or what you'll be using in your day-to-day use of the Fmnp management console. So initially what you're going to do is you're going to enter in the number, same as you do always, and you get the window that comes up as would happen generally. But in this instance, rather than just looking at the reason, oh, it's failed, and then going back to the customer and says it's failed, and then getting onto our technical department and finding out why it's failed, we're actually going to go deeper into that window and see the specific reasons and to see the actual track as we're logging against it. So in that window, you're going to be able to find out the reason for the port failing, what network is the donor network, the reject reason, the actual history of the port as it's going along to find out at what section it actually had failed, and the CTN type, which is critical to when you're doing the port. You'll also be able to find and see the ISME number. The ISME number is probably something you haven't heard before, and what it does is, if you type that into the NESI system, when you'll be able to find the actual CTN that the port is attached to. So when we're bringing in an 087 number and we're actually putting it onto an 086 SIM card, sometimes the dealers, they don't know what 086 SIM card it is that they're porting it onto, and they're only able to give you the 087 number. What happens is when that 087 number doesn't come over to our network, they're not able to find the port because it's still on the Vodafone network. The port date, the port donor, the type of port, and the reject reason. Now the reject reason, there's a number of different reject reasons, but the most common ones are port in progress, registered unregistered mismatch, pre to post mismatch, single multi-line mismatch, and also requested date mismatch, as well as bad debt and CTN not authorized to port. Now bad debt is obviously clearly very self-explanatory. It means that obviously on the Vodafone or Meteor network there's an outstanding debt that the customer needs to pay off before the network will release the number. In the CTN is not authorized to port. What that could be is on large accounts like corporate accounts or semi-state bodies, like the HSE, there could be a number of different numbers on it. And when somebody submits a port, even though it's their number, because it's technically owned by the HSE or the company or the corporation or whatever the case may be, we would have to contact the authorized contact on the overall account to make sure that it is okay to release the number to the individual user, the end user, as it were. So it could be a delay there, or it could also fail at that point because the authorized user or the authorized holder of the account is refusing the number to port. Now obviously, going back, we'll say to the other reasons, they're ones that you would be dealing with all the time and that you know fully what they are. Port is already in progress means that there's a port already that needs to be finalized before you can put this one through, so that's pretty standard. Pre to post mismatch means that it's a prepay number, but it's been submitted as a bill pay number, which is obviously incorrect, and vice versa, and it will fail at that. Single line multi-line means that, let's say a customer has 5 numbers on an account and maybe 2 broadband numbers, that's a multi-line. But if it's submitted as a single line, that will also fail because you have to give the system, because it's a fully automated system, the exact specific information to every account and every CTN, otherwise it will fail. So those are things that you're dealing with all the time. So we're not going to be kind of stay on them for too long as such, like. But another major one that does have that crops up periodically. If you're in the business queue, what that will happen is a multi-line port unauthorized, which means they're trying to port an entire account off of the network. Now, all the networks have a kind of agreement in place where they would consult one another before one of these large accounts gets moved, because if something goes wrong, it will affect, because normally it's businesses or like the HSC or government bodies, it will affect, if an error goes on, it affects more than just one number, and it can affect the entire account. So before a port is submitted, because somebody might do it mistakenly, like a store might type in the wrong number and submit a port up for the wrong number, the customer themselves might think that they have the authorization to do a port when they don't. Any of these things could cause a problem if they're trying to port the entire account across, or they do that mistakenly, which is why all the networks would consult one another before doing that port. Now, it's very handy when you go in to the system, you're able to see then to check, whether it's a port 2 request, a port 6 request, a port 10 request, or a port 14 request. So what that means then is port 2 is the first stage, the port 6 is the second stage, the port 10 is the third stage, and the port 14 is the final stage. So if you get to port 14, it means then that the port is complete. If it fails at any of the other ones, if you open up the browser window, you can see then at what point it failed. And normally you can check then, because a port 2 would indicate that it's a multi-line or a single line or a pre to post mismatch or registered or unregistered mismatch. So that would fail on the first hurdle because they're easy enough ones to spot, so you can fix them up easier. If it's a port 6, you know then that it could be that, like it's a port not authorized to go through because it's a large account, bad debt reason, the other network, and that would be at a port 6. So you then have to, if there was any fault, you'd have to trace it back to that point and resolve it from there. Now, the only time that you'd be logging tracks with the technical department for them to overall investigate it is if it's failing anywhere around where the port 10 is, because port 10 is when it's the actual technical features of call forwarding, the number appearing on, when you make a call, it appearing on somebody else's phone, all of those technical features. If it fails there, that's not going to be something that you can resolve yourself. That'll have to go to the technical department. But if you can kind of troubleshoot at port 2 and port 6 stages, that means you're logging less track with the technical department, which is going to be saving us as a company money. It'll also improve the customer experience, because these are things that you can kind of fix on the call rather than the delay of the 24 to 48 hours while the technical department corrects it. And plus, by only logging technical queries when it should be with the technical department, it means it frees up their time so that we can actually get from like a 48-hour turnaround to maybe down to something of a couple of hours, because they're not snowed in with an awful lot of work that could be done at the coal face by the agents here. So if anybody has any questions, I can go through them here now. But probably, if not, what we'll do is we'll actually do a mock-up of submitting a port and following it all the way through. So if you want to kind of just go back to your computers there now and load up the Fmnp management console and Nessie as well, we'll kind of start with that if nobody has any questions. So nobody has any questions. That's great. So what we'll do is we'll refer back to the board, and at the end of the day's training, because this is only one section of the training, we'll come back and we'll do another mock-up presentation, or another mock-up port at that stage, and we'll go through it then. All right.